So sorry, configuration is definitely something complicated. I'm very happy to be there. As Florent said, I used to be a student sitting on these benches about 12 years ago. And to be honest, had somebody told me that I would be there presenting in front of us, in front of you guys, something about attacking some Microsoft products here, I think I would have laughed at that moment. So here I am. So my name is Nicolas Joly. So I work for Microsoft. I'm based in the UK. I'm in Cheltenham. That's about 2 hours away from London. So I work for the MSRC, the Microsoft Security Response Center. So it's an org inside the org. So in this org, I'm part of the vulnerability and mitigation team. So basically, I'm exploiting stuff, and occasionally I'm also doing chakra cases, like typically Bruno's cases. So here, I'm not going to talk about chakra, no way. I'm going to talk about email security. That's a topic I like, and that's why I'm very happy to be here in front of you guys. So roughly, I'm going to divide that presentation into two parts. So roughly 30-ish minutes on Outlook, attacking Outlook, and another 5 or so minutes on Exchange. So for once, I'm going to start my presentation with a demo so that you guys have a good idea of what I'm talking about. So think about Outlook. What would be, according to you, the worst case scenario for Outlook to be born? You can probably think about an email that you read, you read it, and you see it in the preview pane, and then you get home. So I tell you something, there's even worse. There is vulnerabilities affecting the sync engine, for example. You don't even need to see these emails. Somebody just send it to you, Outlook is connected on the internet, and you get home. No user interaction at all. I've been there for like 12 years or so. That's probably one of the worst bugs I've seen. I'm not going to talk about that bug, too dangerous, but you'll get the CVE in reference. So let's present for a minute that you've never seen what I just showed. So think about Outlook exploits. Is it something common? Well, not really. To be honest, I think I started in that field with Des about 20 years ago. Love letters, Kaggle, something that was spreading with JavaScript signatures. So we'd send an email, and then it would auto-replicate using some signatures, something very funny. But then, basically nothing in 20 years. Occasionally, we get some very good reports, like the one from Haifeli in 2015. 2016, he found a way to insert a flash object into an email, send it to the client, and using a known vulnerability, he managed to get remote code execution just by viewing an email. It's quite good. Another one is Ryan Hansen. So you know, it's one of these days at Microsoft where you just look at the inbox and suddenly you see some emails about somebody that you've never heard of before. And there are 3 mails, 3 vulnerabilities, and you look at the details and you're like, wow, if even half of the submissions are right, it's bad for us. Turns out that day, he was right on all of them. So yeah, thank you, Ryan. So I'm going quickly to talk about these issues in a minute. Last point is probably the worst. All these issues that affect Outlook, and we don't know about them. So I'm thinking, for example, of an exploit that we saw in 2016 that was affecting the font engine in Word. So the attackers there were using a Word document to spread their malware. And so the thing is, they would attach that Word document to an email, send it to you, and then you would open the attachment and get on. The thing is that nobody realized at that moment that you were able to trigger the exact same path just with an email, with Outlook. So you would not need that attachment at all. Crazy things. So Outlook. So it's like a warehouse, to be honest. It's huge. So very quick summary of the attack surface. You've got everything that is related to an email, everything you can find in an email. That can be attachments, that can be calendars, that can be objects, can be pictures, fonts, you name it. You've got also all the other things related to protocols. Can be SMTP, POP3, or some exchange protocols like auto-discover, for example. You've got all the spoofing issues, can be certs, can be DRMs, etc. And you've got also, well, all the remaining macros, because Outlook is part of Office, so you've got macros. So think, for example, of the scenario where somebody would send you an email, and that email would contain macros, and you would be on by macros. I've never seen that scenario, but maybe it's possible. What I'm going to talk about here, of course, I just have 30 minutes with you, so almost nothing. Audio object, TNEF, map your properties, and a rich text format. And before I go on, so you might be wondering why I'm doing that. Because I told you that I work for Microsoft, and you might be thinking that this guy he's crazy. He says he works for Microsoft, and he's literally going to teach us how to hack Outlook. Well, yeah, I get your point, and you're right. But that's not the point of this presentation. My point is that there are all these exploits around there in the wild. People are using them. The question that I have is, how do I get them? How do I fix them so that our customers are happy? I don't have that many answers for that. So, question is, why aren't researchers reporting these bugs to us? Or they do. Occasionally they do, like Haife, like Ryan, but we need more. So why? Maybe because, I don't know, lack of interest in the area, maybe because they don't have access to the Office symbols, which is a good point. It's not easy to debug and to reverse a huge DLL. So we thought, what about presenting our research and some cases that we got? And so, of course, and I'm sure you assume it, all the vulnerabilities that I'm going to present here have been fixed. For some, quite a while ago. So let's dive into it. So where would you start to look for? So you can type Outlook features in Google, and one of the first links that you'll see is this one. Something mentioning TNEF, rich text format, and specifically you look at the second bullet, and you see there's special Outlook features. That's obviously the ones that we want to attack here, the ones that pop calc. So what's a TNEF email? So say that you're using Outlook and somebody sends you an email, so you see this, and then you look on the server, so you see the emitter, and then you see something, the content type set to application MSTNF. So this is that part in base 64 at the bottom of the email. You decode it, and then you see something that is totally unintelligible. You have just no idea there, what's lying there. It's just another file format. So the good news is that as with many file formats that belong to Microsoft, the specifications are open. So just follow that link and you'll find them. So what is TNF basically? Just a sequence of objects, containers, properties. Here you've got an idea of how this works. So I developed a no-1-0 template so that I would be able to see more easily all these properties. I've never released that template. I might do it one day. So my intentions were to release it when somebody sent me a nice case affecting the TNF properties. So I haven't got that case so far, but maybe one of you guys will do. And my intention was to publish a blog post with some bugs and that template. So we'll see, maybe one day. So let me talk first about the rich text format. So one of the common let's say, one of the common view of TNF emails and rich text emails is that they are the same. People think that when you select rich text format in Outlook and you send an email, that you're just going to send a Word document to the other hand. That's partly true. You're sending some rich text. You're sending some rich text format, but apart from that, there are also all these other properties in TNF. So I'm just going to focus here on the PR RTF compressed property. So we've got various encodings. So the most common ones is the compressed one, LZFU. So something that has to do with some compression in binary. You've got also the MELA encoding, which is just plain text. To my knowledge, it's not possible to have Outlook send an email like this in plain text, but maybe there are some possibilities with the old Outlook versions, and maybe Outlook 97, something like that, but definitely not in the recent versions. So if you guys think about fuzzing this, because some of you do that, and we still get cases there, just be aware that the format parser is very pedantic, and so most of your inputs will probably be rejected. However, in some case, you might still be lucky and hit some funky conditions, and which might then trigger some bugs. Yeah, that happens. I think that we fixed a bug in August, last August. Somebody just fuzzed some emails and managed to find a use after free, and so it works. But yeah, so just be aware that you're probably going to waste your time if you do that. So instead, if you want to fuzz it, just use the interrupt library. So it's much easier. So you use .NET to create your program and send your emails, and that's it. I'll come back to that in a minute. So let me focus first on the RTF format. So as you may know, the RTF library belongs to Word. So there's a DLL called www.lib.dll. And so the code is also shared by Outlook. And so you may think, well, there are probably features in Outlook that are definitely not needed. And you might be right. So think about all the specifications. The RTF specifications are huge. There are lots of keywords, and some of them are definitely not needed in Outlook. So one of these is a template keyword. Another one could be the object. For example, inserting a flash object in an email. So I'm going to talk more about this template feature. So this issue was brought to us by Ryan Hanson. So he was studying a Hayface bug, inserting flash into an email. We fixed it, and then he found a way to bypass that fix. He just sent an email with a template keyword, and in that template he would point the source to another RTF that would be set on a remote share. And just by doing that, he managed to work around our fix, and he managed to load Flash again. So at that moment, he was able to send an email that would trigger again Flash, and that's how he managed to get remote code execution. There's more in this attack. So if you think about it, you were just able to trigger the RTF parsing code. But with this feature, you can trick Word into loading whatever format it supports. Basically, for example, the legacy Word format, the legacy document format, which belongs to the 90s, still possible. So with a feature like this, you open a lot more of attack surface. So crazy thing. Another bug with the template keyword, so you chain several documents, and in the end you would get a UAF. So how do you think the product team mitigated that issue? Well, easy. They just removed the functionality. Sometimes they do that, and we should thank them for. So now coming to the interrupt API. So as I told you, it's something it's available in .NET, and it makes your life much easier when you want to send emails. So something that I want to stress is the message class of an email. By default, it's set to well, I don't remember exactly what it said, but like default email something. But you can specify it to be whatever. You can, for example, there is that IPM.contact message class. If you send an email like this, what do you think will happen? Well, you won't see a standard email. Instead, you will see the contact pane. So you've got Outlook, and instead of reading your emails, then suddenly you see a contact pane. And the thing is, for all these message classes, each has its own form and its own properties. So for example, for this one, if you look at the top right corner, there is a picture here. So you're going to think, yeah, you can insert pictures in a standard email. And you're right. But here in this one, the stack to display that picture is different. Here you're using the GGI Plus APIs, the GGI Plus stack to display that picture, while that in a standard email you're going to use the Office one. So if you've got an email, a vulnerability in GDI or GDI Plus, then you might be able to trigger it from here. So think about it when you're looking for vulnerabilities. So there are several classes, message classes. So you can find them. There is another link for more. And there are even some that are not written, not described on these links, but if you know about reverse engineering, I'm pretty sure that you can find them all. So I'd like to focus on one for a moment, IPM remote. So this case was sent to us by Etienne Salman. We didn't give it a CVE. Because we didn't service the bug because that was just a null pointer. So what Etienne did was just take a normal email and change the message class to IPM remote. And just by doing so, he managed to trigger a null pointer in the preview pane. So it's just a null pointer, so not that interesting because you can't exploit that. Still, you can crash the client, but it's not very interesting. Anyway, it made its way to that presentation, but it was still interesting. Now, the other one that I wanted to talk more about was the free document. So basically IPM the document whatever you want. So Ryan Hanson sent us a case where he was able to to send an email that would bypass the protected mode. So basically you would have two attachments in an email. One, a Word document, a standard attachment, and the other one, an OD attachment. And he noticed that if we opened that OD attachment, then Word would run without protected mode. This added with this over CVE, where Office documents run without interaction, and you can get a nice one-click RC. So this is just the code to trigger Ryan issues, but now I've got a video for you that will just show basically what's going on. So that's Ryan's first issue. So you've got an email, you receive it, and words open directly in the preview pane, but that's fine. Here we're in app container, so this is protected mode, so this is fine. So now what happens if you double click that email, if you try to open it in a new window? Well then the code takes a totally different path, and here we're using Joly to render the attachment. And so right now, if you look at Word, well, it's run with medium integrity. So you've actually bypassed the sandbox. So now, if you look at the specifics of this, you'll think about, yeah, well, so he said that that attachment was inserted with Joly, so maybe this has to do with Joly, etc. And so you might look at this email and see that there is a class ID of a Word document there, and you might think, what if I change it? What if I change it, for example, to the class ID of the equation editor? Yeah, and you'd be successful. So why did I use that example? Because 2 years ago, I think, we got a case of somebody who managed to exploit a Stack Overflow in the equation editor. And the thing is, we were still shipping that equation editor, even if this component had about 20 years ago. We were still shipping it with the most recent versions of our product. And the thing is, this component had just no mitigation implemented at all. No ASLR, no stack cookies, so nothing. So if you found a bug in there, you'd be able to exploit it like that way. So use the two vulnerabilities, and then you manage to get a one-click RC with an email. It's quite good. So one thing I wanted to show you also is a bug that we received about 6 months ago. So it was patched last August, so 3 months ago from now. It was found by Salem. Logic issues affecting team invites, team meetings. So here, something very simple. You just tweak some properties in the TNF email, and you would manage to trigger like some very interesting features. Shall execute on whatever you want. So I'm quite scared of doing that, but we might see. Hopefully it will work. Yeah. So I have it here. So let's see if I can show it to you. So yeah, so this is the original email with my template. So as you can see, or as you can guess, more. I'm not sure where it is. Sure it is, because I can't really read what's on the screen. Well, yeah, okay. So basically here, you've got the property in question, and right after, you've got a call to calc. So that was quite worrying. But anyway, thanks, Salem, for reporting that to us. Right, let's carry on. And that was... yep, all good. So I wanted to talk more about Joly. So if you took high-phase research, you see that he spent some time finding a way to load Flash in an email. So you're curious and you want to see how we fix that, because, well, running script within an email, that's something quite scary. So one thing that you might want to look at is how these messages are created. So there are two formats in Outlook. There is the email format, and there is also the message one, .msg. So this picture is just to show you that message is just an Joly document with some structures, some streams inside, and so this is about just how an Joly object is inserted and described in this format. So you're going to say, yeah, but how do I debug that? Oh yeah, good point. You don't have the Office symbols. I do, because I work for Microsoft. But what you have is the Windows symbols, and everything that is related to Joly is publicly documented. For example, in Joly 32, you've got the symbols. So what you could do is just put some breakpoints there, and then you will quickly realize that what Ifei was doing was he found a way to load an Joly object, and what we did was to stop the Joly objects from loading. But if you're curious, you'll see that there was still one object that we could load, and this object we could insert some monikers in there. So why monikers? About 2-3 years ago, we've got loads of examples, loads of exploits affecting DES, and it turns out that you were able to load them in Outlook, which was quite bad. So I'm going to talk about DES. So the first example that I have is one that was reported to us by Will Dorman. So he managed to insert an object using Outlook 97, a standard link, and this object would just trigger a file moniker, and he had a known CV affecting SMB, and so he was able to send an email that when you would read that email, you would just crash with a blue screen. Kernel bug, yeah, quite annoying. Not necessarily good for remote code execution, but still very good for DOS. If you look more at this file moniker, you also see within the code that there is a part that can cover some link shortcuts. So Windows shortcuts, .lnk, very famous since Stuxnet, for example. So the question is, can you load a library from a shortcut within an email? Maybe, I don't know, I've never tried, but this is a possibility that we should have in mind. Instead, here's a stack trace of a bug in structured query that was possible to trigger with a shortcut or with an email. So I'd like to take more time on the obj-ref moniker. So I did that research about 3 years ago. And at that moment, I had just no idea of what these monikers were. And so I decided to focus on the obj-ref moniker, and good thing that I did. So this one is just about unmarshalling a custom COM object. So it turns out that we were able to send an email that would unmarshal this custom object. So you can't unmarshal everything. I think there were at that moment 17 or 18 trusted unmarshals in the system. So I took one. I chose one, which was the MSVid control object. So in this library, there were several unmarshals, and one caught my attention. So it was this one. On this one, you can see the code that there is a loop that just goes over things that you've got in your stream, and it tries to instantiate some COM objects on the hypersys stream init interface. And if you've got some knowledge of how Windows works and how these COM objects work, you'll know that this interface is the one that is used to instantiate scripts. So typically I. So at that moment, I knew that I was able to instantiate Flash again. And so at that moment, my skip manager, I think he told me that, Nico, you've been at Microsoft for almost a year now. It's time to leave Adobe behind and it's time to move more on some Microsoft stuff. So instead, focus on Microsoft. And that was a good point. So I left Flash and instead I focused on another COM object, the XML feed moniker. How did I find it? I don't know. I just tried them all. I think I had like 5,000 COM objects on my machine. I just tried them all, loading some HTML, some script, to see if one would react. And this one reacted. And so thanks to that one, I was able to load a VB script. So you send an email, and then you're able to load some VB scripts. So you're still a bit away from a calc, but not that far away. Just add a VB script 0 days, and here you go. With your calc, with a VB 0 day. So multiple bugs fixed in these attacks. So in the unmarshallers, in MSVid, CDL. Of course, so after that, we decided to ship the activation filter. So we added the objdref and the XML monitor, the XML feed monitor. Another one is do not load objects in the pane, not saying the preview pane, so just the pane in general, because if you hit reply or if you hit forward, then you might hit some different code in Outlook that are not necessarily covered by the preview pane. It was possible, for example, to get an RC at some point with the equation editor bug just by replying to that email. So it was quite bad. Another VB script bug, of course. So one thing that we might mention is that nowadays we can't load VB script anymore, which is quite a good news. And then restrict objects loaded by the diagnostic service. And if you followed that presentation so far, you should be wondering what I'm talking about here. The thing is, this bug affecting the unmarshaller doesn't only affect Outlook, it affects basically everything in the system, as Windows relies a lot of unmarshalling and marshalling COM objects. So you just need to think about a scenario where a high-level COM object, COM applications would take some stream and serialize it for you. And then even if there are some restrictions in the code, it might just be too late because the COM object has already been deserialized. And this is exactly what's happening with the diagnostic service. So how did I find that service? I didn't know about it. Until 2016, I think, Lockhart, who used to work from Google, he found that the service was there just to load a library for you with system. And where you see that, you're right, like, why did we do that? And anyway, if you look at the code in this service, there are lots of methods and most of them are restricted. But the thing is that there is one method, the get graph data method, that takes a safe array. And so there is some coded and method that checks if you're authenticated, if you've got the right to call this API. But the thing is, when you call it and you enter the beginning of the function, it's already too late because the COM has already been unmarshalled. And so I've got a demo here for you, just showing that I can just send an email, then you view it in the preview pane, and then you get on. And you get on with system. That was quite bad at the time. So here you see Notepad running with system. So that's it for Outlook. So obviously there are lots of other things that I could cover. I just covered a very tiny part here, but yeah, there are definitely lots of other things to go. So I'd like now to mention a few words on Exchange. So again, one of my main issues these days when I start a project is where can I get some resources? What has been done before? Where can I get some examples? Where can I find something interesting to start that research? So for Exchange, there was basically nothing when I started that. There was one example still, an attack, an exploit from the shadow brokers targeting Exchange 2003 on, I think, Windows Server 2003. So that was quite oldie, let's say. And I put it here, something that was reported to ZDI, quite a bit unrelated to that research, but to be honest, there wasn't that many, so I put the example here. So here, the attack would work, you would have to leave a voicemail message, and then with some tricks you were able to deserialize some .NET component and get remote code execution. So not necessarily something that has to do with an email, but still something affecting exchange. That's why I put it here. So when you attack it, there are of course various attack scenarios. So what are you doing? Are you authenticated? Are you an anonymous attacker? What are you doing? Are you trying to dose the server? Are you trying to get remote code execution? Are you trying to get XSSs? Trying some OAuth attacks like we saw in the previous presentations. So yeah, it's up to you, really. So what I wanted to do was to get remote code execution on Exchange. So I spent some time on it. So I found one component, XRPC32. I'm not covering this bit in this talk, but I covered it before. So if you're curious, you can see my talk at ForceCon. Yeah, those bits are covered. But basically, this was still a library written in C++. So still that you could still attack with memory corruptions. Found some bugs in there, but nothing that I could exploit. So, but that still was some interesting research. One thing still that I wanted to show you is MFC Mappy. So that one tool, something very, very useful that you can use to open your mail database. I used it, for example, to dump it and get some TNF properties that I had never seen before in some emails. So I was able to replay them and get some interesting paths with them. So yeah, if you want to do some research in there, definitely look at that, because you might see things that people just don't see otherwise. Now, I wanted to show you an attack on OWA. So think about OWA. So let's come back to the Joly object, and of course, your browser won't be able to render the Joly object ever. If you use IE, if you use Chrome, if you use Edge, whatever you want to use, you won't be able to use the Joly object. So still, there's some code that processes this object and converts this as a picture. So let's say that you want to send an RTF document in the email itself, so you won't be able to edit that object, obviously, but you will still be able to see a picture. So there's some code covering doing the transformation. So this is done in Joly converter.exe on the Exchange server, and what you want to check is the code in Joly 32 that does that. So it basically parses 3 different clipboard formats. So the meta files, WMF and EMF, and the bitmap file format. So the EMF is quite bad because it allows you to load all sorts of pictures. So if you've got a bug affecting, for example, JPEG or PNG, you will be able to trigger it from VMF. It's just a container. So whatever bugs that you can find in there, in GDI or GDI Plus, you will be able to trigger it from this point. So the attack that I had was fixed, I think, in June or July this year. So I've got a demo here for you, my last demo. So it's about sending an email that just crashes the server. So I thought, initially I wanted to get a remote code execution on the server with a picture, and in the end I ended up with a dose on the server. That's not too bad. I mean, you send an email and you're able to crash the Exchange server. So here, the bug was not very fancy, it was just a stack exhaustion, but still quite good just from the picture. As you can see, the bugs didn't survive. The outcome of that research was still, so I failed. I wanted to get anonymous remote code execution on Exchange. Sadly, I failed. Spent some time on it. I couldn't get a remote viable vector, but still managed to uncover a couple of bugs. Perhaps it was still possible to get code execution on those. I mean, those on affecting XRPC. I'm not sure, but I'd love if one of you guys could prove me wrong on this. So you've got the CVs in references, and so I'd really like if you guys could do some research on this and prove me wrong. Prove me that it's still possible to get some attacks, some anonymous attack on Exchange. So here's a bunch of reference, a bunch of links if you want to dig a bit this topic. And thank you. realize it's quite late, but happy to take questions if you have any. I'm sure those guys are very hungry.
Yeah. So, do you have any questions for Nicolas? Anyone, or are you too hungry and you want to rush for lunch? Is there any? Oops, sorry.
Hello. How does it translate or does it affect the mobile application, the Android or iOS Outlook client, or is it a completely different code base?
Yeah, that's totally different, yeah.
So do they have support for TNF and
I had a look at the Android one, and it's written in Java. So that has just nothing to do with the code base on Windows. Could be still some interesting research. So I know that Natalie on well, not your team, but the other guys in California, she found a bug. She found a way to, I think, drop an attachment using a path traversal vulnerability. She wasn't able to get a remote code execution, but she was basically able to break the app. It was quite a good attack. I think patch 2 years ago, something like that. Still interesting research.
Any other question? No? So we're going to be thanking Nicolas, and we will resume at 2.